He obtained a doctorate in Ottoman history from Royal Holloway, University of London. He taught the Modern Turkish Language and Ottoman History and Palaeography, which is the study of old handwriting, at the University of Athens and in Berlin. His publications are mainly focused on Ottoman epigraphy, the edition of Ottoman archival material, the historical geography, demography, economic and environmental history of our Greek lands under Ottoman rule. Georgios is currently employed as a Senior Postdoctoral Researcher at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena, Palaeo-Science and History Independent Research Group. What incredible credentials. Georgios, we are so fortunate. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing with us today. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much. I would like, first of all, good evening to our participants and attendees from Europe. Good afternoon to our good friends from America. Thank you very much, Carol. And I would like to thank my former student, Mr. Kontos, for inviting me in this conference. You have done a wonderful job. Let me start sharing my screen. And you can give me the green light when I am good. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. Thank you. It's perfect.
All right. So we will be talking about how Ottoman primary sources can shed light on Greek genealogical and anthroponymic studies. So we will start with the detailed Ottoman taxation cadastres. We will talk about the recorded data, the data we find therein that are administrative, geographical, demographic, and financial. Of course, we will talk about the anthroponymic value of this data, and then we will move to other types of sources, the judicial records, title deeds, identification cards and passports, and finally, other inventories. Let me start with the Ottoman taxation cadastres, the Defteri Hakani, or also known as Tahrir Defters. In the wake of the conquest, it was necessary for the Ottoman government to conduct a survey of each province to record the tax-paying population, their produce and revenues. Such surveys were then repeated at regular intervals of 20 to 30 years or at the enthronement of a new sultan. So, by order of the Sultan, an Ottoman governmental employee and a scribe, probably accompanied by an assistant who knew the local language, visited the settlements of each province one by one and recorded all residents with tax liability on the spot. The cadastres they compiled are tax surveys of entities encumbered with a capital tax, whose revenue was meant to meet the needs of the Ottoman cavalrymen, the Timariots. There are two kinds of these cadastres, the detailed ones and the abridged ones. The detailed ones are the ones that record the heads of households, the bachelors and the widows. The bachelors are unmarried men over 12 to 15 years of age that have to pay taxes since they constitute labor force. Each Timariot was granted the revenue for one or more settlements of a district, which was collected by him directly from the inhabitants in lieu of salary. The cadastres compiled in the 15th and 16th century are generally more reliable than the ones of the 17th, which are verbatim copies of the previous ones. Actually, the ones compiled in the mid-15th, or let's say the second half of the 15th century, depict the late Byzantine period, a period where we don't have such sources apart from the Practica we find in Central Macedonia. Hundreds of those Ottoman cadastres have survived for the Greek lands, and they are housed in archives in Istanbul, in Ankara, in Sofia, and also in monasteries in Greece. The ones to be found in Greece, unfortunately, have survived in fragmentary state. So I will try to give you an example of a typical entry in such a detailed cadastre. This manuscript comes from the National Library of Bulgaria. It is the first extant cadastre pertaining to the Peloponnese, dated in 1460, 1463, so immediately after the Ottoman conquest of this province. So the first thing we see in such an entry is the name of the district. This one is the district of Hlemoutsi, Hulumic in Ottoman Turkish, which is today's Kastrokilinis in Elis. Then we have the Timariot. So here, this is the allotment of Elvanoglu Mahmud from the foreign adventurers, and he campaigns on his own behalf, wearing an armor, that means he himself and his horse, and he oaths to bring a military servant. Then we have the name of the village. This is Nihor. It is Neohori village, existing even in our days. And after that, we have the list of the inhabitants. They are not, this is not a demographic, a population census, but we only have the names of the heads of each household, the male heads. So let me start with Nikolas Aronis, Yannis Tsernaaris, Andreas Doxamanolis, Yannis Poulias Effendis, so he bears a title which means that he was kind of dignitary of that village, or a nobleman. Thodoros Lidoritis, Stefanos Metaxomatis, Yannis Giatsos, Andreas Kalogyros, Θόδωρος Τριδεμόνας, Θόδωρος Μαρδάρης, Μαρκόπουλος Ανδρέας, Γουλιάμος Στυλιανός, Μίλεσης Αγαπητός, Bachelor Michalis Μοναχινός, Bachelor Michalis Τσερνάρης, and finally Bachelor Lazaros Metaxomatis. Then we have the number of the households and the bachelors of this specific settlement, the total amount of revenue that its inhabitants had to pay the Timariot every year. All calculations are made in akçes, that was the Ottoman silver coin known in the Greek lands as aspron. And in that decade of the 1460s, one akçe contained 0.96 grams of silver. Then we have the breakdown to each crop's tax or any other taxable asset. It always starts with the per capita tax, the ispence. Then we have a number of tithes, tithe on vineyards, on wheat, on barley, on fruits, swine tax, wine tax, and marriage tax, a tax that women who were about to get married had to pay. We have seen that the most common way to record an individual was by his forename followed by the family name. So there are different ways on the basis of the existing information. When the family name was unknown, the individual was identified on the basis of family relationships. As we can see here from another manuscript, which is housed in the Prime Ministry Ottoman Archives in Istanbul and pertains to Chalcidicé in Central Macedonia, the village of Galatista, there is a certain Demos, son of Kalamaras. Moving to Thessaly in Vathirema, there is a bachelor named Thodoros, brother of Petros. Nearby in Agrelia of Trikala, we have the name of Stephanos, who is the son-in-law of Georgios. Back to the Peloponnese in Xirohori of Achaia, we have Nicholas, who is the nephew of Nicholas Livanis. Here, I would like to draw your attention to the Greek phrase that the Ottoman scribe chose to use, which is anepsosti and derives from anipsios too. So he employed a Greek term there, which is something rather common, mainly in the cadastres of the 15th century. In Paralimni, again in Achaia, there is a Dimitris who is the stepson of Domenicas, and again we have a Greek phrase progonos tou. Finally, there is a Manolis recorded in Dimitsana of Arcadia, who is just a relative of his. This relative pronoun refers to the previous entry, which belongs to Thodoros Kourtopoulos. The syntax and the vocabulary here is Persian, so hish is relative in Persian. If no family connections could be ascertained, the individual was identified by virtue of whose neighbor he was. And let us move to Hatziko in Achaia, where we have Retsis, who lives by Arestis. So he is a neighbor of Arestis. And another example of a lodger, so Bachelor Yannis, who is the lodger of Evorondinos. They both lived under the same roof. Now let us see how widows are recorded, either simply by their forename, like widow Zoe in Nestani of Arcadia, by forename and surname, like widow Dimitra Frangina from Vrachni, with reference to their deceased husband, like widow Maria, who is the wife of the late Papa Theodoropoulos from Platanitsa, and occasionally without mentioning their forename. So what we only have in hand is the name of the deceased husband, like a lady who was the wife of Georgios Sklavopoulos from Orino Korakovouni in Arcadia. Then there are other examples where widows are recorded with reference to their son, like, no, before I go to that, I'm sorry. This is another example of a widow that was recorded in reference to her deceased husband, but I chose to present that just to give you the Greek phrase behind the Ottoman, which is to Yakumu, so Yakumos's widow. We don't have the name of the lady, just the forename of the deceased husband. And here we're talking about the reference to the widow's son. So this is the mother of Andreas from an unidentified locality called Xifia in Laconia, most probably on Taygetus mountain. And another unidentified settlement called Yanilata, most probably in southwestern Arcadia. There is a widow who is recorded as daughter of Kalantzis. In Zaruchla of Achaia, we have a widow who is called Michalina. This is an andronym, so most probably the name of her deceased husband was Michalis, who was his sister-in-law. His refers again to the previous entry, which is Yannis Pavlopoulos. And again, the Ottoman scribe opts for a Greek phrase, niphitou. The scribes of the registers seem to have attempted to render as closely, as accurately as possible the late medieval pronunciation of toponyms and anthroponyms, abiding, of course, by the phonetic rules of Turkish. Thus, these sources contain a true treasure for linguists researching onomastics. For example, the TT10, this first cadaster of the Peloponnese, attests the well-known deletion of unstressed vowels that still characterizes the Peloponnesian dialects of Greek. For example, place name Perthori is recorded as Perthor and not Perithori or learned Perithorion. And the surname of the first listed inhabitant is Exarchoplo instead of Exarchopoulo. Now let me move to the second type of source, which is the judicial records. These records of Islamic courts are kept chronologically, well, most of the times, and they consist of all decision of court cases, hukm, any significant matter that require to be recorded, the hujjat, such as purchase or sale, debt, bond, auction, or sale of public land or endowment, dedication deeds, wills, certificates of inheritance, proxy, etc. And summaries of every sort of order or instruction from the central government, from Constantinople to the provinces. As you can easily understand, it was mostly Muslims that took cases to these kinds of courts. However, non-Muslims addressed Islamic courts as well, mainly to record and ratify deeds or to secure more lenient verdicts against other non-Muslims. The judicial records in Greece are found in the Historical Archive of Macedonia in Thessaloniki, in the Historical Archive of Crete and the Turkish Archive of Heraklion, the General State Archives of Imathia in Veria, and the General State Archives of Kozani in Western Macedonia. This is a very important archive as it contains the entire Ottoman archive of Thessaly as well. So here I am showing you an entry from the Sharia court of Heraklion. Maria, daughter of Constantinos, resident of Reis Effendi quarter of Candia, through a proxy named Ömer Bey, son of Abdullah, according to the testimony of Constantinos, son of Georgis, and Andreas, son of Theophilos, takes Stephanis, son of Michalis, in marriage, providing a wedding donation, a dowry of 500 aspers, which is not to be deposited in advance. So this case is already recorded. It is found in the judicial records of Heraklion. So if anything goes wrong after this marriage, then people can address the court, appeal, or do whatever they need according to the Islamic law. And what we find in this kind of documents, concerning anthroponymy, is mostly first names, forenames. Another kind of source are the title deeds, the tapus enedi, that we find mostly in private collections throughout Greece, like the one you are now seeing on your screen from Trikala, dated in 1864. It comes from Golfari village, and it is the transfer of field ownership title from Yorgos to Mitros. However, the Ottoman state gathered all these deeds and put up huge inventories, some of which have survived in Greek archives, like this one from the Historical Archive of Macedonia in Thessaloniki, which pertains to the prefecture of Pieria. And the folio I am showing holds the entries of October and November 1872. The highlighted column includes the names of the owners of real estate. Passports or any other kind of identification cards is also a source of people's onomastics. They are mostly found in private collections, like this one from Elassona that was issued in 1906 and belongs to a certain Christos Tsachanakis. These kinds of documents are more common in the second half of the 19th century and the first decades of the 20th century in northern Greece. The final type of source is debt inventory, Defteri Zimemat, and this particular one, which is housed again in the National Library of Bulgaria in Sofia, is a register of the debts of the executed and fugitive revolutionaries to the profit of the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate. They were compiled in collaboration with the Patriarchate of Constantinople during or immediately after the Greek War of Independence. So an entry here, a typical entry, goes debts of the executed dragoman. Dragoman was the official translator of the Imperial Council, Kostaki, he is Konstantin Mourouzis, under the jurisdiction of the Diocese of Heraklia, that was Redestos, modern-day Tekirdal. 1,500 piastres due to Vinak Rally by commercial bill, 1,000 piastres due to Elleniko Mourouzi, total 2,500 piastres. So you can easily see how this kind of inventories shed light not only to anthroponymy, but to prosopography as well. To sum up, the Ottoman rule constitutes the lengthiest phase of late medieval and early modern period of Greek history. The Ottoman Chancery had been one of the most productive ones in world history, yielding documents that literally number millions. Among them, different kinds of manuscripts preserve anthroponyms that cover the entire Hellenophone populations in the Ottoman realm down to a village level. A consistent study of them is bound to furnish the researcher of Greek ancestry and anthroponymy unique evidence. Thank you for your attention.
Yorgos, I have to tell you that this has been an incredibly educational presentation, something that I personally, and I'm sure many of the hundreds of people that are listening and watching right now, have never been exposed to. I thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for showing us these documents and for explaining to us how things are, how they're written, how they're constructed. I would imagine that, is it possible to even, let's say we have a historian who really wants to try to understand more about his or her area of Greece through these Ottoman records. How do they go about doing that? Do they hire somebody at an Ottoman archival repository? Is there a website where they can maybe get information about how to research a little bit more about the Ottoman records in their area? Can you help us with that, please?
Yes, there are catalogs of archives, the ones in Istanbul and in Ankara, that they are already published. So we can search place names there. We need to know the district that we are interested in. Mm-hmm. And then we see the call numbers of a series of cadastres. The next step is to go to those archives, apply, and then we can get the entire document, or if we know the page, the folios, just those, and then we need to study them.
I see. But let's say, okay, so my family is near today's area of Sparta. So let's say I was interested in Mistras back during the Ottoman period. Where would I go to find somebody that would work and help me to access those areas? I think that's really important for people to understand. Is there a place that they can go? Where do the Ottoman researchers and historians, do they congregate on a certain website, or how do you find them?
So you need to establish contact with an Ottomanist.
Yes.
So perhaps you need to search on Greek university websites, see if there is somebody who teaches Ottoman history.
Okay.
Or even search if such a cadaster is already published. We have a number of them already published in Greek. And this, would make us really lucky, to find something already edited and translated that we can find, we can trace immediately the name that we are interested in. Unfortunately, most of the Ottomanists who work on this kind of material are interested in economic history. Mm-hmm. So they don't really work on editing the names.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I was thinking more from a historical perspective.
Yes. Like
if there was a historian who wanted researching maybe a certain area in Greece, like I said, Mistras for me, mm-hmm. I would understand that I'm not going to get genealogical documents with names, but I would be able to get information about the area, the economics, the agriculture, the general population, that kind of thing, to enrich my historical understanding of the area that I've come from. So thank you for answering my question. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Carol.
And we wish you such great success as you continue your work. What an important field. And I think as Greek historians, and now we have a whole groundswell of Greek genealogists, people interested in their families and in their family history. And I see in the near future that the interest in Ottoman records and what is in the Ottoman collections in the archives will just continue to grow and grow and grow as more and more people look to expand their understanding beyond just their own family, but to the history of their area. What you're doing is such an important work.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for opening our eyes to this today. Have a wonderful evening.
Anytime. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.